Alright, today we're going to talk about implementing a custom search view. So I'm just going to pull up my emulator here. We have a blank activity, a blank project. If we go back to Studio, we've got a blank main activity with a empty main activity XML file. And let's just pop over to GIMP here for a second. Just going to kind of describe what we're going to be doing today. So if you think about a search view, like we got to think about the components here. So like if this is the toolbar that we're going to be creating, this is where the search view is going to live. Now like what components does a search view have, right? So you have this terribly drawn magnifying glass, and then this, so like this is like the closed state, right? So this is when the user's not searching for something. And then in the other state you have this search view. It no longer should have a magnifying glass because this is when you're in search mode, right? So there should be like a text field, like, where you can input text here. This is where your search query is going to show up, and then probably some kind of way to execute the search. So if we had like, yeah, why not? If we had just like a little like Google has a nice airplane icon. This looks terrible, but so this is like the send button or execute button. And maybe over here we also have an X button to close you out of the search. So now that we know kind of what the two states of our search view are going to be, we're going to be implementing this in the views XML code coming up here pretty shortly. So just keep in mind that we're going to have two states here: a state where you're not searching, the user is doing something else, and you're going to have a state where the user is actively searching. And yeah, let's just get into the code. And I'm going to be upfront here. We're not actually going to be implementing the code that returns, search queries and the actual implementation of it, but we're going to be doing more of let's just implement the view itself and the animations, because that's kind of what this series is all about. So let's get into it. So the first thing that we're going to need to do is probably create a new view class, because we don't want this code to live in the activity. So let's just do a new Kotlin file class. Let's call it search view. Yeah, let's add that to Git. Sure, thank you. So when you're constructing a view, there's two things that you need to include here in the constructor parameters, so that you can use it in your XML files. The first thing is context. So we're going to implement context here in the parameter. We're going to import that, Alt Enter, and the other thing we need is the attribute set. I usually just call it ATTRS for short. And there's one thing that we're still missing here, and that's that we don't really know. So we could just extend view if we wanted to, right? If we just want to make this thing a standard Android view, that's what we would extend, and then we would construct this with context and attributes. So to construct this search view, we take in a context and attributes, and then we extend the view class. We pass that context and the attribute set into the view that we're extending. So let's just start by, let's see, I'm going to change this to project view. I don't really like the Android view. So we're going to dive into the main resource set, the layout set. We're going to make a new layout file. This is where all of our view code for the search view is going to live. So we're going to call this view underscore search bar search. Just call it view underscore search. That's fine. Okay, we're going to format this. Oh no. So this isn't formatting correctly. So if I pop into settings here, I can go into editor. Where is it? Code style, XML, set from, predefined style, Android. Apply, okay, and if I try and format this, there we go. Now it's auto-formatting correctly. So let's pop back over to GIMP here for a second. If we remember our two states, the best way that I can think to implement this, having two separate states that don't know about each other, would be to have both of them stacked on top of each other in a frame layout. So let's do that now. Let's pop back over to Studio. We're going to extend a frame layout here instead of a linear layout. We won't need an orientation on this frame layout because that's for linear layouts, not for anything else. So then, like, if we just think about this, this is going to be like let's just make up some views here real quick. So we have our relative layout, or that's just what I'm going to be choosing to do here. The height, we'll just call it wrap content for now. We'll fix that up in a second. Let's duplicate this, and we'll just give these guys some IDs. Like this one we'll call search closed view, and this one we'll call search open view. Yeah, search open view. Okay. So the search open view is going to be, so the search closed view is going to be the default state. So search open view, we're just going to give this a default visibility. I could choose to use gone here, but I can already foresee some problems that are going to be happening if we use gone instead of invisible. So I'm going to be using invisible. And what that's going to do, or why that's important, is because when a view is gone, it no longer takes up space on the screen, and it's no longer like ready to be animated on. And when it's invisible, it's taking up space, it's ready to be animated on, and it's a safer operation. It's a safer variable to use, parameter to use, flag. I guess flag's the best word. It's the safest visibility flag to use for when you're going to be swapping view visibilities often. So keeping that in mind. So we have our two views here. We're going to flip back to the search view for a second. I'll actually just split this to the right so that we can look at both of these things at the same time. Just give yourself some more room here. So we extended view earlier, and that was just kind of to get this class started off. But what we should actually be extending is a frame layout, because that's what the root layout is in the XML file. So let's just switch this to a frame layout now. Good. So we have our search view class started up here. So if I pop back over to main activity XML, let's put this over here. I can actually add in, let's go back to search view. I can actually just add in a search view now. So supersoftware.android example search bar search view. The width is going to be match parent. The height is going to be wrap content for now. And then we can collapse the empty tag because we're not actually going to be putting anything inside of the search view here. So we've basically just created a custom view here, and we've allowed ourselves to implement that wherever we wanted to. Now, if I fire this up on the emulator, we're not going to see anything because the search view is not actually drawing anything on the screen. I could put as much as I want, as much code as I want in here right now, like a text view and background colors and everything, but it's not going to show up on the screen. That's because we actually need to do some work here in search view to get this wired up properly. So I know this tutorial's in Kotlin, and a lot of you guys are Java developers, but don't be frightened. I'm going to try and explain what I'm doing in Kotlin as well, so you Java developers know what I'm talking about. So in Kotlin, you have this thing called the init block, and what this does is it runs it as soon as the object is created. So like setup stuff goes here, right? This would be the equivalent if in Java if you just did something in the constructor. So like if this thing was a normal Java class, you would have something that would look like public void search view, you know, with your arguments here, args here, and man, I haven't written Java in a long time. But then you would call, you know, you would construct your frame layout here, and then anything after that construction stuff. So construction here, and then anything after the construction in these lines right here would be basically your init block, right? But since we're in Kotlin, we don't need to do any of that stuff, and we just call our init block here. So in the init, we're going to need to make this search view knowledgeable about the layout file that it's going to be using to show stuff on the screen. So we've named that view_search. So all we need to do is we need to get the layout inflator provided by views, and we'll call from context. Okay, so now we have our layout inflator. We're going to want to actually inflate. Let's see what the parameters are. So the first one is the layout file we want to inflate. So r.layout. I'm going to need to import my R file here. I think I should have to. Let's just start typing, and it should ask us to import it. So yeah, we want to say r.layout.view_search. And next up we have the root view group. Let's just put null here for now, and attach to root false. Actually, we're just going to put this. The root view group is this. So we're basically just saying, like, treat the root layout as the frame layout, the one that we're extending. Okay, so now that we have layout inflator from context inflate, something will actually start showing on the screen now. Well, not particularly in this case because we don't actually show anything in this layout file yet. So let's change that. So this closed view, let's give it a background. Let's pop down here, give it a background, a color of color primary, and then yeah, let's just run this and make sure our stuff is working. All right, so clearly something's going wrong here. Pop back over to Studio. We've got our coordinator layout that's match parent, our search view, which is width of match parent, height of wrap content, but we don't actually have anything in these relative layouts. So even though we're giving this a background color, this height is technically 0 because it's wrapping content and there's no content, so it has a height of 0. So let's change that. Android gives you this nice thing that you can use when trying to create toolbar-like objects. So for the height of this, instead of match parent, we're going to say question mark action bar height, action bar size. I think this equivalates to like 50 something dp, like 54 dp or something similar to that. That number's not too important. Excuse me. That number's not too important, so let's not focus on the number that too much, but let's just know that this gives us a height of what the typical Android action bar would be. So now that we have a bounding height, let's make these match parent instead of wrap content. Relative layouts really shouldn't be wrap content anyways. It's kind of a bad idea. So let's run this again. Swap back over to our emulator. Okay, we still have something wrong here. And what would that be? Let's pop back over to our code for a second. Maybe this should also be action bar size. No luck. Let's see. Maybe I've inflated something incorrectly in the view. So we create our layout inflator. We inflate r.layout.view_search. And let's also give this a background color just to make sure that nothing's going on with those relative layouts. And let's give this a color accent. It's going to look really ugly because this green and pink don't really go well together, but let's just make sure that view is showing on screen. Okay, so this frame layout isn't even showing on the screen. Okay, so something's going on here. Maybe this was the wrong thing to pass in for this view. Well, this isn't going so hot. Let's see. There we go. Okay. So I just have my inflator stuff a little bit mixed up. So like I said, we want to basically tell this layout inflator that the root layout for this is this, and this is referring to the search view, which is a frame layout. So the frame layout should be the root layout. I'm sorry, I'm showing my emulator. So this being the root view group should be the frame layout that we are extending for this view, and then attached to parent or attached to root, we're going to call true. So the reason why we weren't showing before is because we weren't attaching to root. So basically, this layout inflator was just returning a view, and it wasn't actually attaching it to anything. So this true is very important here. Okay. So if we switch back to our emulator, we have a action bar sized view up here with the background color of color primary. Let's start adding some stuff to that. So if we look back at our sketch here, the search closed view actually needs a icon here. So let's add that in. So let's switch back to Studio. We're going to add in a new drawable. So we're going to right click on our drawable folder, and we're going to say vector asset. And you guys can't actually see this window, but this isn't too important. So I'm just going to import a new vector drawable from the Android icon set, and we're going to search for search. And I found a magnifying glass icon that I'm going to import call it IC_search, and we'll give it a color of white. Okay, and finish. Okay, so just to show you guys what I just did, we have this vector icon that we just imported. If we preview it, this is what it looks like. Sorry about the dialogue not showing. I guess I still have some recording issues to figure out. Right, so we can actually close out of our activity main file, XML file now. We're not going to be needing this anymore. Okay. Actually, we can change this back to wrap content. So this view is a little bit more simple now. Cool, so we have this relative layout. Let's add in, because this is our search closed view, so we're going to need a way to open the search, right? So we're going to add in an image view. Or we could just do a view, it doesn't really matter. But yeah, let's do a view, it's more simple, it's more lightweight. So the width, the standard Android icon width is going to be 24 dp, or the width and height should be 24 dp. It's to material specs. And the ID, we're going to give this an ID of open search. Open search button, why not? And then for the background of this view, we're going to say @drawable IC_search. That's the icon we just created. And we're going to say align parent end true, not false, but true, and center vertical true. We're also going to give it a margin end of 16 dp. And let's fire this up and see what it looks like. Okay, so this is looking pretty bare bones, but it's looking pretty nice. So we've got a magnifying glass up here that does nothing when we click on it. Let's switch back to Studio. Let's set a background color on this other relative layout. Background color, let's see, well, let's just make it white. So we're going to say hash FFF. So that's a white background. And actually, let's get a little bit more fancy with it. Let's go into our drawable folder. We're going to make a new drawable resource. And we're going to say for file name, we're going to call it rounded corner background. And the root element is going to be selector is fine. We'll change it in a second. So I forgot you guys can actually see those dialogues. Okay, so this is our rounded corner XML drawable file. So the root element here is going to be a shape. And that shape is actually going to be, if I bring this down here, Android shape is going to be rectangle. We're also going to add in a solid color of, like I said, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, FFFFFF, which is white. And that's a solid. And then we're going to say corners, radius 4 dp. So can you preview these? I think you can. Yeah, so you can't. It's kind of hard to tell. But if I took out this corner attribute here, yeah, it's really hard to tell in the video. But these corners are actually being rounded very slightly, and 4 dp is what Google recommends for corner radiuses on buttons and nice looking backgrounds and card views and stuff like that. It's just a nice number. But to make this more prevalent for the video, if I change this to something like 16, you can really start to see those corners get rounded. So like this does have an effect. But since this view is going to be smaller, we're going to do a smaller rounded corner radius of 4. Or maybe we can do 8. Just so... Alright, I'm sticking with 4. We'll change it later if we need to. Let's get back to the point of this video. So we can close out of that now. We're not going to need it. And instead of making the background color of the open search view a color, we're going to say @drawable rounded corner background. It's still going to be invisible. And then... let's give this a margin all around of 4 dp. So this should create like a little space of green around the white. So if you remember, our closed search view is green, our open search view is going to be white. So this should create a nice little green border. Now we're going to need to trigger this to open. So in the init, after we inflate our layout, we're going to say open search button. And this is Kotlin, this is Kotlin X synthetic import, so I can just call view objects directly. But if you're doing Java, just use your find view by IDs or butter knife or whatever kind of view binding you're using. Open search button dot set on click listener, and then inside this on click listener, we're going to want to say open search. And let's just one line this so it looks all nice. And then let's make a new function called open search. Private fun open search. And you can make this a public function if you want as well, so that you can open this search view externally from some other kind of button from your activity or fragment or whatever you guys want to do. But we're going to make it private because we're only going to be opening and closing it from the actual search view. So in Open Search, there's one thing that we need to do. There's two things we need to do actually. So so we have our search closed view. Dot visibility is going to be set to view.invisible. Actually, we don't actually need to hide this view because this other view is going to be drawn on top of it. So there is only one thing we need to do, which is search open view dot visibility equals view dot visible. So it's going to change from invisible to visible. And on these relative layouts, let's just make sure that layout gravity is equal to center. And that's just going to make sure that both of these views are centered horizontally and vertically inside this frame layout. So yeah, let's run this here. Pop back to the emulator. And when we click on this magnifying glass, we should see our search view. So it's looking pretty decent. There's still a lot that we don't have that I would like to have in here, so let's keep trucking. Let's change the padding, or the margin, sorry, to 60p, just give it a little bit of extra green around it, make it look nice and crisp. Yeah, let's start with that. Let's do 8dp. Let's see what that looks like. Yeah, it's a little bit too much, I think. So I think 4 was probably fine. Let's go back to 4. And let's stick with that and keep rolling here. So what don't we still have? Let's look back at our sketch here. So this view has been implemented successfully. So we don't have to worry about this view anymore. Let's implement the second view, which is the search open view. So we're going to need 2 more icons. We're going to need the airplane or some kind of send button that executes the search for us, and then some kind of X button which would exit out the search for us. So let's switch back to Studio. And I'm sorry you guys can't see these dialog windows, but I'm going to import 2 more vector assets. I'm going to import IC_close, and we're going to look for the close icon, which is just an X. So IC_close, and this one is actually going to be, color primary. I'll explain in a second. So I've imported IC_close, and now I'm going to import IC, let's do a search here. So send, okay, IC_send, and let's import that. Okay, so apologize for you guys not being able to see that dialog, but send and close. Let's take a look at these guys. So IC_send looks like this, and we're going to want to tint this to @color/primary. Okay, and then you'll see how this all works out in a second. Let's close out of that. We don't need that anymore. IC_close is going to be tinted to @color/color_primary. We're not going to need that anymore, so we can close it. And then let's implement that on this relative layout. So look, we're going to want to put that send button in the same spot as that search button, so that there's a nice transition and that the button doesn't actually look out of place. So we're going to just copy this view directly, because we're going to use the same parameters on it. And this is going to be send, or we'll call it execute search button. This isn't super important because, like I said, we're not going to be actually implementing the functionality of the search view today, just the animations and stuff like that. So same width and height as the search open button, same positioning as the search open button. Instead of background IC search, we're going to be IC_send. Okay, so we've got one thing implemented on this. Let's duplicate this view, and this time we're going to call it close search button. Okay, same width and height, but instead of align parent end, we're going to do align parent start, true. And center vertical, and instead of margin end 16, we're going to do margin start 16. I think you guys can kind of see where this is going. But yeah, let's put this on the device and see what it looks like. So when we open up our search, I did not change the close button icon. So IC_send should be changed to IC_close. Run that again real quick. So we open up the search, we have this send button over here, and we have a close button over here. So the close button doesn't actually do anything yet. Let's fix that now. So inside of search view, we want to say close search button set on click listener and call it close search. Okay, so now we need a method called private unclose search. Like I said, you can make this public if you wanted. If you wanted to close your search any other way, like with a back button or something, you can totally do that and call this externally. But this is going to be an internal function for us for now. So search. This is going to just call search open view dot visibility equals view dot invisible. Not gone, but invisible, because we still want it to take up space, and we're going to be animating this pretty shortly here. So we just want to set ourselves up for success on that. So we're going to run this again. Pop over to the emulator. And we can now see that clicking the X on this actually closes our search. So we can toggle between these two states quite nicely. And the only thing we're missing now is a way to enter in some kind of search. So let's do that now. So back to Studio. In between these two views, we're going to have a edit text, a width of match parent, and a height of, we'll call it match parent as well. We're not actually gonna need an ID on this because, like I said, we're not using any of the text. We're not actually doing anything with it. But we are going to want to say to end of close search button and to start of execute search button. Now this is just going to pin this view between the X and the send button, so that it starts after the X but ends before the search button. Then lastly, let's add a overall margin, let's do a margin start of 16 dp. We're also going to do a margin end of 16 dp, but we're going to do a margin top of 8 dp, or like 4 dp, just give it a little bit of space, and a margin bottom of 4 dp. Okay, so this is looking pretty good. Let's put it on the device and see what it looks like. Okay, so we have this this field that we can type things into now, and we're not going to focus on making this part look too pretty. We can totally style that another time, but the point of this is to be able to open and close this search. And if we pop back, so we noticed that when we close the search and open it, that search text still stays there. That's something that we could fix easily in this video. So when we say close search, or open search, either one would really work. Let's just do it on both just to be safe. Why not? So let's actually give this edit text an ID, call it search query, or search input or something, search input text. And then we're going to say search input text dot clear, or dot set text of nothing. We're just going to do that on open and on close. And let's head back over to the emulator, and we can now see that if we type something in here and close it, that it doesn't actually have that query in it anymore. So that was an easy fix. Let's pop back over to Studio. I'm actually going to take this margin top and margin bottom out of this edit text. I think it's adding too much room into it, so let's see what that looks like. Yeah, I think that looks a little bit better. I think there's plenty of room without the margin on top and margin bottom. Okay, so we're getting there. Let's do the important part of this video now. Whoops, let's go back to this guy. Nope, that was the old video. It is this one. Okay, so let's do some animations now, because that's honestly the point of this video, right? So that's pretty easy to do. A lot easier than you think it would be. So what we're going to be working with here is a circular animation. Let's go over to GIMP for a second, and I'll kind of draw out the idea behind it. So if we just look at this guy right here, oops. If we just look at this one view right here, the way a circular animation works, right? You can give it a starting point and a time and stuff like that, and over time, over the amount of time that you say, this circle grows and grows and grows very gradually as fast as you tell it to. So it creates a really nice animation. So what we want to do is we want to create a circular animation from the center of this view right here. Let's use a different color just to make sure you guys can see that. And let's bump up the size a little bit. Okay. So we want to create a circular animation that starts right here and grows outward in all directions until it hits this spot, or some spot that if we a spot to the point where the circle is going to be all around this x, because x is the center point of the circle. We want the circle to be have a great enough radius so that it covers the entire view, and that's very important. So let's go back over to Studio. Think about how we're going to do this. So there's a couple components to that, but let's start by creating a circular reveal animation. So we're going to say file animation, or anim is going to be equal to, we'll call it just circular reveal. Let's be explicit here. Circular reveal, and you use view animation utils static constructor to create a circular reveal animation. So, and this is just a standard Android view thing. You shouldn't need any libraries to do this. So this takes a couple parameters, right? So like the first parameter is a view, and this is the view that we're going to be revealing. So the view that we're going to be revealing is the search open view. So let's pass the search open view in. The next parameter that it wants is the center x, and the center x is going to be the open search button. So we're going to need some parentheses here because we're going to be doing some intense calculations. Not really, but so we want the open search button dot right plus open search button dot left divided by 2. Now this gives us the center x of the open search button. Okay, so next up is the center y. So we're going to be doing something very similar, but instead of right and left, we're going to be doing top and bottom. All right, divided by 2 should work out for us. The start radius is going to be 0f, because it's going to start as basically nothing and grow into some end radius. Now, if we go back over to GIMP here, you remember that I said this needs to be a circle big enough to cover this entire area, right? So if we think about a circle, trying to draw this as perfect as possible, that's pretty good. So if we have the center of the circle here, and we want this all to be covered, we need some radius here for the circle to have, right? So this basically boils down to just being the width of this view, and at least in this case, which is pretty nice, so we don't really have to do any calculations. So the width of this view is going to be the end radius of our calculation of our circle. So that would be the we can really just say this dot, so just width. And this looks kind of confusing. Wait, this wants a float. So width dot to float. So this looks a little bit confusing, or it might look a little bit confusing, but this width is just a property on our search view. It's just a member variable, basically. You get it for extending view groups and views. So you could think about it as like this dot width, but you don't need this dot. So this width is just the width of our entire search view. Just keep that in mind. So now we've got our circular reveal set up. We can also do something like circular reveal dot duration. Let's just set it to 300 milliseconds, and then we can call circular reveal dot start. Okay, so let's give that a shot. And it's very important before we switch over to the emulator that if you try and do this on a view that's not visible, if you try and do it on a view that's invisible or gone, nothing's going to happen. You actually need to call visible, you need to set the view to be visible before starting the animation. And that's going to allow you to actually animate it. So don't worry, there's not going to be any like jarring frame splits between these two things happening. They happen very quickly after each other, so it's not a big deal. But you need to do the animation after you set it to be visible. So let's throw it on the device and head over there. Yeah, see, that's looking pretty good already. So when you open it, you get this nice circular reveal from the point where you clicked, or just about the point where you clicked. And it looks really good. So yeah, let's do a little bit of extra work here and go back to Studio. And let's do the same thing for when we close it. So this works opposite. This works differently though. So let's rename this to circular conceal or something like that, something just opposite of reveal. We're going to create a circular reveal or a circular conceal, which is basically just going to be the reverse of a reveal, but it's going to work the same. So the circular conceal is going to happen on search open view. The same view that we were revealing is the one we were going to conceal. But we're going to change, no, we don't want to change the center X and center Y because we want it to collapse into the same point from where it was created or expanded or revealed. Okay. The duration we're going to keep the same, and we're going to call start. Now, we do need to switch the start and end radius though. So the start radius is going to be the width.float. The end radius is going to be going to 0. So it's just the opposite direction that it was going before. Now there's one thing that we still need to do on this, and this is where it gets a little bit confusing. But basically, what we want to do is we need to keep this view visible so that the animation can happen, but after the animation ends is when we actually want to make this view invisible. So the way we do that is we say circular conceal dot set animation listener. There should be add listener. I think it's add listener that we want to do here. Okay, so we say object animator dot animation. Let's see, got to import that first. Whoops, sorry about that. All right, animator dot animator listener, and we're going to construct that object. No, we don't want to construct that. Okay, so we want to override. There's a lot of stuff to override. It kind of sucks that we have to implement all this stuff. But, you know, we could pull out like an abstract class or something if we really wanted to. Okay, so some of this stuff isn't right. Let's see. I don't think we actually need that. I don't think we actually need this. Okay, so there's 4 methods that we have to implement for the animation listener. So let's just make these all unit for now. I'll explain in a second. In Kotlin, unit is basically just nothing. It's kind of like a void, but this is basically just saying like on animation repeat, do unit, and unit is nothing. So like when this override method is called, nothing's going to happen when you supply unit. So if it makes it feel more comfortable, unit is the same thing as just leaving empty brackets. Okay, so the point of all this is that on the animation end, we're going to actually want to do something, and that something is this stuff. So after the animation has ended, make sure the animation has ended, and then you set the view to be invisible, and then you set the text, then you clear the text. We don't want to clear the text or set the view invisible until the animation is completely done. So let's throw this on the device and see what it looks like. Yeah, that looks pretty good. Yeah, it looks great. So another thing that we could do to make this better is that when a user clicks on a search button, they would expect a keyboard to pop up and they could just start typing immediately. They shouldn't have to click the search button and then click the edit text and then start typing. That's too many actions, and we like our users to be as lazy as possible as developers. So let's pop back over to Studio, and when we open the search, we're going to want to do something here. So if we let's play with just doing, focusing the edit text before the circular reveal is actually done. And then we can, if it doesn't look quite right, we can wait until the reveal is done and then focus it. But the best way to do this is going to just be, we have our edit text, which is search input edit text. Sorry, search input text. And we're going to say focus. Request focus, request focus. That should be enough to actually pull up the keyboard. Just kidding. That didn't work at all. All right, let's investigate a little bit. So, yeah. Let's see. I know there's some crazy stuff you can do to manually show the keyboard. Yeah, like getting the input method manager. You can totally do all that, but we're not going to worry about that for now. There's not really a point in doing that in this video. Okay, so with that in mind, there's one last thing that we could do on this video, or that I should at least talk about. and that's that we're adding a listener on this circular conceal, and we're never removing that listener. So circular conceal dot remove all listeners. And I got a lot of flack on my last video for adding listeners and adding listeners and adding other stuff to certain objects and then never removing those things. And I totally agree, and I should have been doing that in the last video as well. And just know that every time you go to close a search, you're adding a new listener. Or, if you're adding something, it's going to be adding every time you call this method. So if we call this method 5 times, we now have 5 listeners on this animation. Well, actually, in this case, that's technically not true because we're creating a brand new object and then setting a listener on it. So in this case, we don't technically need to remove the listener, but it's always a good practice that you remove anything that you add when you're done with it. So like when you set an on-click listener, you don't ever need to really remove that click listener in most cases, because when you go to set another click listener, like if I were to do set on-click listener, do something else. Oh, this should be a block comment. Whoops. Okay, I swear, I promise I can develop. Here we go. Do something else. So when you set something for a second time, it removes that first instance of that thing that you set. But when you add something, you can continue to add and continue to add, and it will keep adding stuff to that object. So you need to make sure you remove what you're adding when you're done with it and when you no longer need it. Yeah, so I think that's going to be it for this video. We'll just pop back over here and take one last look at the animation. I think it turns out pretty nice. In the future, if you guys want me to actually do stuff like implement the code to make this search tool, this search view actually work, and like return queries and stuff like that, I'd totally be open to it. But like I said, I want to keep these videos more focused around animations and implementing custom views and stuff like that. So yeah, I think I'm going to call it here. Thanks for watching. Check the description down below for the GitHub source code and the Medium blog post that I'm going to write up as a summary for this. And thanks for watching, and drop a comment down below of what you guys want to see me do next. Thanks, guys.